கிளாஸஸ் அந்த எண்ட்ல இருந்து ஜாயின் பண்ணீங்கன்னா அந்த கூகுள் மீட்டிங் கோட் கொடுத்தீங்க அப்படின்னா நீங்க ஒரு மீட்டிங்ல ஜாயின் பண்ணுவீங்க. அந்த மீட்டிங்ல தோழர்கள் இந்த எண்ட் ஆஃப் த ஹால் உட்கார்ந்து மொழிபெயர்த்து கொடுத்துட்டு இருக்காங்க. நீங்க சைமல்டேனியஸ் டிரான்ஸ்லேஷன் கேட்கணும். ஸோ இந்த தோழர்கள் ஆங்கிலத்தில் பேசும் பட்சத்துல உங்களுக்கு தமிழ் மொழிபெயர்ப்பு தேவைப்பட்டுச்சு அப்படின்னா இது கூகுள் மீட்டிங்ல இருந்து உங்களுக்கு தமிழ் மொழிபெயர்ப்பு வழங்கப்படும். ஸோ இது ஒரு முக்கியமான இன்ஸ்ட்ரக்ஷன். இன்னொரு இன்ஸ்ட்ரக்ஷன் என்ன அப்படின்னா இந்த நிகழ்வு ஒரு ஓபன் செஷன் மற்றும் க்ளோஸ் செஷன் இது ரெண்டாமே போது முதல் அமர்வு அப்படின்றது வந்து ஒரு ஓபன் செஷனா இருக்கும். ரெண்டாவது அமர்வு ஏற்கனவே பதிவு செய்யப்பட்ட பங்கேற்பாளர்களுக்கான நிகழ்வா மட்டுமே இருக்கும் அப்படின்றத சொல்லிக்கிறோம். இன்னும் சற்று நேரத்துல நம்ம நிகழ்வு ஆரம்பிக்கலாம். இந்த ஏற்கனவே சாய்நாத்துடைய உரை நம்மளோட ஒர்க் சொசைட்டி தமிழ் பக்கத்துல லைவ் ஸ்ட்ரீம் பண்ணப்படும் அப்படிங்கிறதையும் நம்ம தெரிஞ்சுக்கிறோம். வெளியில தண்ணி இருக்குது, இங்கேயும் தண்ணி இருக்குது. ஸ்ட்ரெயிட்டா இந்த டோருக்கு வெளியில ஒரு டாய்லெட்டும் இந்த டோருக்கு வெளியில லெஃப்ட் சைடுல ஒரு கழிவறையும் இருக்குது. ரெண்டுமே ஜெண்டர் நியூட்ரல் டாய்லெட்ஸ். ஆண்கள் பெண்கள் மாற்றுப்பாளையர்கள் எல்லாருமே உபயோகப்படுத்துற ஒரு கழிவறையா இருக்கும் அப்படிங்கிறத சொல்லிக்கிறோம். நம்ம இந்த நிகழ்வை ஆரம்பிக்கும் பொழுதுலே எல்லாருக்கும் காலை வணக்கம். மறுபடியும் சமீப காலமா ஒரு ரொம்ப முக்கியமான ஒரு சுவாரஸ்யமான வாக்கியத்தை கடந்த ஒரு கூட வந்துருக்கோம் அப்படின்னு நினைச்சேன். Labor feminism will be at its best if we have a fighting labor movement and a fighting labor radical social movement and a press that is funded and supported and read by workers and it's covering not just a tiny elite and big societies. இது வந்து ஜாக்கோபின் அப்படிங்கிற ஒரு இணையதள வெப்சைட்ல வந்து ஒரு ஆர்டிக்கல்ல எழுதப்பட்ட ஒரு வாக்கியம், ரொம்ப சுவாரஸ்யமான வாக்கியமா இருக்குது. அதாவது ஒரு போர் குணம் மிக்க ஒரு தொழிலாளர் இயக்கமும் ஒரு சமூக இயக்கமும் இருந்தது அப்படின்னா தொழிலாளர்களுக்கான ஊடக வேலையும் வந்து வலுவாக இருக்கும் அப்படின்னு கூறப்பட்டது. மேலும் தொழிலாளர்கள் படித்து அவர்கள் நிதி வழங்குகிற ஒரு இயக்கமா ஒரு தளமா இருக்கிற ஒரு ஊடகம் சிறந்ததா இருக்கும் அப்படின்னு வந்து இந்த கோட் சொல்லிச்சு. இப்ப நம்ம இருக்கிற ஒரு சமூக சூழல் எப்படி இருக்குன்னா சென்னையிலும் சரி பல மாவட்டங்களிலும் சரி தினம் தொழிலாளர்களோட போராட்டம் அதிகரிச்சுட்டே தான் இருக்குது. தினம் வந்து ஒரு புது விதமான போராட்டமும் பல பிரச்சனைகளும் வந்து தொழிலாளர் வர்க்கம் வெளியே கொண்டு வந்துட்டே இருக்காங்க. ஆனா அந்த போராட்டத்துக்கான கவனம் நம்ம கொடுக்குறோம் அப்படின்னா அதுக்கான ஒரு மீடியா ஸ்பேஸ், அதுக்கான ஒரு அதுக்கான குரல் இருக்கா அப்படின்னு பார்த்தோம்னா ரொம்ப குறைவான குரலா தான் இருக்குது. பல தொழிலாளர்கள் திரண்ட போராட்டமும் ஒரு மீடியா கூட வந்து ரிப்போர்ட் பண்ணதுக்கு இல்லாத ஒரு போராட்டமா இருந்துக்கிறத நம்ம பல நேரங்கள்ல பார்க்க முடியுது. ஏற்றத்தாழ்வுகள் சராசரியா அதிகமாயிட்டு இருக்குது. இங்க வந்து ஒரு தரப்பினர்களுக்கு மட்டுமே வந்து ஒரு வளமும் செழுமையும் அதிகரிச்சு போது இங்க அடித்தளத்தில் இருக்கிற மக்கள் தொடர்ச்சியாக வந்து வன்முறைக்கு ஈடாகிறதையும் நம்ம பார்த்துட்டு இருக்கோம். மிக முக்கியமாக பருவநிலை மாற்றம். இங்க தொடர்ச்சியா பருவநிலை மாற்றத்தை பத்தி வேலை செய்யற நிறைய அமைப்புகள் வந்திருக்காங்க. நம்ம தொடர்ச்சியா பேசணும். அதோடைய அதிகமான பாதிப்பு உழைக்கும் மக்களுக்கு, அடித்தளத்துல வேலை செய்யற மக்களுக்கு தான் அதோட தாக்கம் அதிகமா இருக்கிறத பார்க்க முடியுது. சுத்தி இந்த மாதிரி நம்ம கிட்ட பல கதைகள் இருக்கு, பல அவநம்பிக்கைகளும் இருக்குது. ஆனா அந்த மாதிரியான சூழல்ல இந்த மாதிரியான ஒரு ஹால் ஃபுல் ஆஃப் மாணவர்கள், தொழிலாளர்கள், தொழிற்சங்க பிரதிநிதிகள் இங்க எல்லாருமே சேர்ந்து வந்திருக்கோம். இந்த மாதிரியான ஒரு மிக்ஸ் லாட் பார்க்கறதே வந்து ரொம்ப மகிழ்ச்சியா இருக்கு. மிக முக்கியமாக பல்வேறு துறையில இருந்து இங்க வந்திருக்கிற தொழில்கள் நம்ம எல்லாருமே எந்த இடத்துல இணைச்சிருக்கோம் அப்படின்னா இந்த தொழிலாளர்கள் ஒரு முக்கிய ஒரு புள்ளியா இருக்காங்க, இணைப்பு புள்ளியா இருக்காங்க. சோ அந்த தொழிலாளர்களை நான் வரவேற்கிறேன். இந்த மாதிரியான முயற்சிகள் தான் வந்து இந்த தொழிற்சங்க இயக்கத்திற்கு ரொம்ப முக்கியமான ஒரு கூடுதல் பலமா இருக்கும் அப்படின்னு நம்பி நம்மளோட இணைந்திருக்க தொழிற்சங்க பிரதிநிதிகளை நான் வரவேற்கிறேன். மேலும் இங்க நிறைய புதுமுகங்களை நம்ம பார்க்க முடியுது. முக்கியமா மாணவர்கள் நிறைய பேர் வந்திருக்கீங்க, தனிநபர்கள், கலைஞர்கள் வந்திருக்காங்க. சோ அவங்களையும் நான் வரவேற்கிறேன். மிக முக்கியமா இந்த ஐடியா, இந்த தொழிலாளர் ஊடகம், ஒரு லேபர் பீட் அதை வந்து ஸ்ட்ரெங்தன் பண்றோம் அப்படிங்கிற ஒரு ஐடியாவை வந்து நீங்களும் நம்பி இங்க இணைச்சிருக்க மற்ற எல்லாருக்குமே வந்து ஒரு வரவேற்பை கொடுத்திருக்கேன். மிக முக்கியமாக நம்மளோட இங்க இணைந்திருக்கிறது சாய்நாத் அவர்கள். அவருடைய ஒரு ஆழமான சமூக மற்றும் பொருளாதார ஏற்றத்தாழ்வு பற்றிய அந்த புரிதலில் இருந்து ஏன் இந்த தொழிலாளர் ஊடகம் முக்கியம், இந்த வெளி ஏன் அவசியமா இருக்கு அப்படின்றத பத்தி நம்மளோட பகிர்ந்துக்கிறவங்க இருக்க சாய்நாத் அவரையும் வரவேற்கிறேன். இந்த வேலை அவசியம் அப்படின்னு புரியுது. ஆனா நம்மளோட தமிழ்நாடு சூழல் என்ன, நம்மளோட தொழிலாளர் வர்க்கத்தை எப்படி புரிஞ்சுக்கிறது, இந்த பிரச்சனைகள்லாம் இருக்குது படிக்கிறதும் சரி, அத ஒரு ஒரு கடித வார்த்தை கொண்டு நம்ம எப்படி பார்க்கிறது புரிஞ்சுக்கிறது அப்படின்ற ஒரு பார்வை நமக்கு கொடுக்கறதுக்கு வித்யாசாகர் அவர்கள் நம்மளோட இருக்காங்க. மேலும் இதெல்லாம் புரியுது, தொழிலாளர் பணி தேவை அப்படின்னு புரியுது, இந்த பிரச்சனைகள் புரியுது, ஏற்கனவே தொழிலாளர் பணி ரொம்ப வலுவா இருக்குது, ஆனா அது இப்ப இழந்துட்டு இருக்கு அப்படிங்கிற விஷயங்கள் எனக்கு புரியுது. தமிழ்நாடு சூழலும் புரியுது. ஆனா எப்படி நம்ம இதை களத்துக்கு தயாராகுது? ஒரு நிறைய பிரச்சனைகள் இருக்கு நம்மளை சுத்தி. ஆனா அந்த பிரச்சனையை எப்படி அணுகிறது? நாம ஒரு தொழிலாளரா, ஒரு தொழிற்சங்கமா இந்த பிரச்சனையை எப்படி அணுகிறது, எப்படி கையாளுறது, என்ன ஆங்கிள் பாக்குறது, ஒரு சின்ன டெக்னிக்காலிட்டிஸ் அதுக்கு பின்னாடி என்னவா இருக்கும், அது களத்துக்கு நம்ம இங்க தயார்படுத்திக்கணும்னா என்ன பண்ணணும் அப்படின்னு நம்ம கூட பகிர்ந்துக்கிறதுக்கு அவர்தான் அப்படின்னு ஒரு ஜேர்னலிஸ்ட் நம்மளோட இங்க இருக்காங்க. அந்த தொடரையும் நான் வரவேற்கிறேன். மிக முக்கியமாக எல்லா விதத்திலையும் எங்களுக்கு ஒரு பெரிய உறுதுணையா இருக்கிற பர்பஸ் யூனிட்டி டெல்லி டீம், சந்தீப் மற்றும் அந்த தோழர்களையும் நான் வரவேற்கிறேன். இந்த பிக் டே அப்படிங்கிறது வந்து எங்களுக்கு ஒரு ட்ரீம் கம் ட்ரூ மொமெண்டா தான் இருக்கு. பல ஆண்டுகளாக இந்த மீடியா ஸ்பேஸ்ல தொழிலாளர்களுடைய குரல் வெளியில வரணும் அப்படின்னு நம்ம வேலை செஞ்சு இந்த நேரத்துல இது நம்ம இந்த குழுவை நம்ம விரிவுபடுத்தணும், இந்த பார்வையை இன்னும் பலத்தை வேலை செய்யற நபர்களை விரிவுபடுத்தணும் அப்படின்றது வந்து ஒரு பல நாள் கனவா இருந்துச்சு. ஸோ அந்த கனவை இன்னைக்கு நிறைவேறிருக்கு. ஸோ அதை சாத்தியப்படுத்தின பர்பஸ் யூனிட்டி சென்னை டீமையும் நான் வந்து வரவேற்கிறேன். மிக முக்கியமாக இந்த தரத்தை, இந்த இடத்தை எங்களுக்கு உரித்தாங்க வித்யாசாகர் அமைப்பை சார்ந்த பூனம் தோழர்களையும் நான் வரவேற்கிறேன். இந்த ஸ்பேஸ் அப்படின்றது வந்து எங்களுக்கு ஒரு பெரிய புத்துணர்ச்சியா தான் இருக்கு அப்படின்றத சொல்லணும். மிக சுருக்கமாக இதெல்லாமே சொல்லியாச்சு. முதல்ல நீங்க யார் அப்படின்றது சில பேருடைய மைண்ட் வாய்ஸா இருக்கு அப்படின்றது எங்களுக்கு தெரியுது. ஸோ டீம் யாரு, நாங்க என்ன எப்படி செயல்படுறோம் அப்படின்றத பத்தி அறிமுகம் கொடுக்கறதுக்கு சந்தீப் அவர்களை வரவேற்கிறேன். இதையும் நாங்கள் மொழிபெயர்க்கிறோம். ஐ வெல்கம் சந்தீப் டு இன்ட்ரோடியூஸ் about the Workers' Unity team and the work.
Thank you, Vaishnavi. Hello, friends and guests. A warm welcome to all attendees. We have been planning this workshop for quite some time, and it's truly heartening to see it materialize today. A special thanks to acclaimed journalist Sainath, known for his work on marginalized communities, for agreeing to be part of this event. I also extend my heartfelt congratulations to Venkat, Vaishnavi, Sara, Geeta, Gokul, Sushmita, Vijay, and all the wonderful people from Chennai who contributed to organizing this workshop. I would like to share a bit about Workers' Unity. Since the advent of liberalization, globalization, and privatization in 1990s, news about workers has been systematically pushed out of mainstream media. It was not just workers who suffered this marginalization. Dalits, Adivasi, women, minorities, farmers, and other sections of the working class were affected too. However, the rise of online media brought a change, with the many of these communities establishing their own issue-centric media platforms, YouTube channels, Twitter, and Facebook pages. Our notably example is Dalit media, which has created a significant digital ecosystem from South to North India, commanding a large audience that even mainstream media cannot ignore. During the farmers' protests, several Twitter and Facebook pages emerged, providing real-time updates and mainstream media often picked up. Yes, despite being a large organized population, workers lacked their own dedicated media and channels or any ecosystem. To fill this void, Workers' Unity has launched on May Day in 2018, initially focusing on the industrial areas of Delhi, Haryana, and Uttarakhand. Our reach expanded to Nimrana, Jaipur, Surat during the lockdown. Throughout the lockdown, Workers' Unity not only covered the plight of migrating workers, but also established a helpline to assist them nationwide. When the farmers movement began, workers' unity covered it extensively for 13 months, conducting interviews with the several experts to understand the farmers' struggle better. These efforts culminated in the publication of a book titled Farmers' Rebellion, which I brought some copies. Last year, we launched Workers' Unity Tamil in Chennai and we started working on the Workers' Unity Tamil YouTube channel. Today, we have a dedicated and experienced team that covers labor issues in Tamil Nadu. This workshop, organized by same team, aims to sensitize young journalists about labor issues and nurture a new generation of young journalists capable of effectively reporting on marginalized communities. Those interested can also collaborate with the workers' unity. In this digital age, journalism has transformed significantly. New tools, social media platforms, and technology like algorithm and have emerged, enabling us to amplify our voices globally. We hope to learn and apply new insights from this workshop to our work. With the esteemed presence of Mr. P. Sainath, we anticipate gaining a profound understanding of key issues and much more. Once again, a warm welcome and thank you all.
nice for the approach. So maybe we need to that.
Maybe this we can. இப்போ ஒரு மாதிரி சரியா இருக்கான்னு செக் பண்ணிக்க சொல்லுங்க தோழர். மைக்கை இன்னும் நம்ம கிட்ட இருக்கிறத உறுதி செய்யலாம். அடுத்து கோகுல் அவர்களை, சாய்நாத் அவர்களை அறிமுகப்படுத்துறதுக்கு அழைக்கிறேன்.
Just hold it. Put it on your
All right. Is it okay? நன்றி வைஷ்ணவி தோழர். இன்றைய நிகழ்ச்சி இந்த லேபர் பீட் பயிலரங்கமானது ஒரு ஒர்க்கர்ஸ் யூனிட்டியின் லேபர் பீட்டை உயிர்ப்பிக்கும் அல்லது மீட்டெடுக்கும் ஒரு முயற்சி, ஒரு தொடக்கமாக தான் நாங்கள் பார்க்குறோம். ஓகே ஓகே ஓகே. ஸோ இன்றைய நிகழ்ச்சியை, அதாவது இந்த பயிலரங்கத்தை ஒரு ஒர்க்கர்ஸ் யூனிட்டி வந்து ஒரு லேபர் பீட்டை உயிர்ப்பிக்கும் இல்லை ஒரு மீட்டெடுக்கும் ஒரு முயற்சியாக தான் வந்து இது அந்த ஒரு மீட்டெடுக்கும் ஒரு முயற்சியின் தொடக்கமாக தான் நாங்கள் இதை பார்க்குறோம். இந்த பயிலரங்கத்தின் முதல் அமர்வாக திரு சாய்நாத் அவர்கள் வந்து பிரதான உரையை வந்து நமக்கு வந்து இப்போ அளிப்பார். ஸோ பெரும்பான்மையான பிரதான ஊடக வெளியில் இந்த பிரதான ஊடக வெளிகள் கார்ப்பரேட் மயங்களை நோக்கி, கார்ப்பரேட்டுகளின் இன்ட்ரெஸ்ட்டுகளை நோக்கி நகர்ந்து கொண்டிருந்த காலகட்டத்தில் இருந்து கிராமப்புற பொருளாதார அரசியலையும் கிராமப்புற சார் தொழிலாளர் வர்க்கத்தின் இன்னல்களையும், இன்னும் குறிப்பாக சொல்லப்போனால் விவசாயிகள், ஒடுக்கப்பட்ட மக்களின் இன்னல்களை, துயர்களை தனது இளமை பருவத்திலிருந்து, அதாவது ஃப்ரீலான்ஸ் ஜேர்னலிஸ்டாக ஸ்டார்ட் பண்ண கரியரில் இருந்து தி ஹிந்து என்ற செய்தி இதழில் ரூரல் அஃபேர்ஸ் எடிட்டராக 25 வருட காலமாக இந்த மக்கள்களின் இன்னல்களை பத்திரிகை மூலமும், எழுத்துக்கள் மூலமும், ஆவணப்படங்கள் மூலமும் இந்த பிரதான ஊடக வெளியில் அனைவருக்கும் வெளிச்சம் காட்டியவர் சாய்நாத்தின் ஒரு முக்கிய பங்காகும். இன்னும் சொல்ல போனால் வந்து இன்று நகர்ப்புற தொழிலாளர் வர்க்க மக்களின் பிரச்சனைகள் மற்றும் தொழிலாளர் வர்க்கத்தின் பிரச்சனைகள் மற்றும் பல புலம்பெயர் தொழிலாளர்களின் பிரச்சனை காரணிகளை அன்றே வந்து நமக்கு வெளிச்சம் போட்டு காட்டியவர்கள் திரு சாய்நாத் அவர்கள் தனது எழுத்துக்கள் மூலமும் ஆவணப்படங்கள் மூலமும். ஸோ இவருடைய 25 ஆண்டுகால ரூரல் அஃபேர்ஸ் எடிட்டராக ஹிந்துவில் பணியாற்றிய தொகுப்பு ஆராய்ச்சி ஆவணங்களை எவ்ரிபடி லவ்ஸ் அ குட் ட்ராட் என்ற புத்தகம் மூலம் ஒரு தொகுப்பாக தொடுத்து அதை வந்து புத்தகமாக வெளியிட்டவர். இந்த புத்தகம் இன்னும் பல பல்கலைக்கழகங்களில் வந்து ஒரு பாடப்புத்தகமாக ஜேர்னலிசம் ஸ்கூல்ஸில் வந்து பாடப்புத்தகமாக வந்து பயிற்றுவிட்டு வருகிறோம். தென் இன்னும் ஏசியாவிலே வந்து மிகவும் ப்ரெஸ்டீஜியஸ் அவார்டு என்று சொல்லக்கூடிய ராமன் மேக்செசே அவார்டை வென்ற ஒரு ஜேர்னலிஸ்ட் சாய்நாத் அவர்கள். ஸோ இன்னும் சொல்லப்போனால் வந்து இந்த ரூரல் இந்தியாவில் வந்து லேபர் பீட்டை ரொம்ப வந்து உயிர்ப்பித்து வைத்து கொண்டிருக்கிறவர் ஒரு பி சாய்நாத் என்று நம்ம கூறலாம். அதாவது வந்து என்னதான் வந்து பிரதான ஊடக வெளியில் இந்த கிராமப்புற மக்களையும் கிராமப்புற பொருளாதார பிரச்சனைகளையும் வெளிச்சம் பெற்று காட்டியிருந்தாலும் இண்டிபெண்டன்ட் மீடியாவின் தேவையை உணர்ந்து இந்த இண்டிபெண்டன்ட் மீடியாவின் தேவையை உணர்ந்து அதுக்கான சான்றாக பீப்பிள் ஆர்கைவ்ஸ் ஆஃப் ரூரல் இந்தியா என்ற ஒரு வெளியை நிறுவியவர் திரு சாய்நாத் அவர்கள். ஸோ த மேன் ஹூ கெப்ட் the man who kept and keeping this labor beat alive in the rural parts of India. And we are honored to have him here today and listen to him. Now I humbly welcoming Sainath to be on stage. Thank you, sir.
For the time being, this is for the Facebook Live. So yeah, this is for apologies for this. For the time being, can we also put this? This is for the Facebook Live.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. I'm going to do all of you a very big favor and not speak in Tamil. You don't want to hear my Tamil. I think Tamil Nadu had its last linguistic riots 57, 58 years ago. If I speak in Tamil, they'll resume today. Anyway, it's okay. I speak 5 languages equally badly. So the one I do least badly, I'll stick to that today. I'm going to try and talk to you about the context in which media function today. If we don't know that context, we are not going to be able to do any stories about workers or anyone else. And that context is supremely important in terms of who owns the media, what beats there are today in the media. All these things are pretty important. Sure. Okay, now? Yeah. When I joined journalism, which in September will be 44 years ago, every newspaper had a full-time labor correspondent. Every newspaper had one. Yeah, the most elitist newspapers had a labor correspondent who looked at employment issues, these sort of things. By 1995-96, not a single newspaper had a full-time labor correspondent. By 2000, in many newspapers like the Times of India, the labor, you had people covering labor, but as one amongst many beats, maybe, poultry farming and plumbing and labor and things like that. But by 2000, it got merged into a beat called industrial relations. So the Times of India had a correspondent and editor, industrial relations. Economic Times had one. Industrial relations meant that essentially you spoke to industry. Yeah. And by 2005, this was so total, when there were major labor upheavals, mind you, the labor beat was ascribed to the industrial relations correspondent. And in no time, you had a generation that knew nothing about labor. So, the industrial relations correspondent would essentially be communicating with the PR officer of the corporates, with the public relations officers of the corporates, or the now called corporate communications. They would be talking to the PR of corporates on labor issues, because those corporates might be having some strike or some trouble or some problem. So you were speaking to industry to inform you about industry, about labor. And when it got impossible to avoid the labor viewpoint, I would get phone calls from correspondents of major newspapers saying, hey, can you, in the same city, Mumbai, saying, sir, can you give us the names and numbers of a couple of trade union people, we need to quote from them. The person covering the labor beat had no contact in trade unions. Okay? Can you give me the names of a couple of trade union leaders and telephone numbers? Because we need a quote so that you can show that you were very balanced. You also spoke to them. You're covering the labor. The person who first rang me up was a person who had been covering the labor beat for 7 years and wanted names of trade union leaders in the city of Mumbai. So that's what happened to the labor beat. Along with that, a number of other beats disappeared. The agriculture beat disappeared, by which I refer to that as the farming beat. Yeah, because many newspapers and channels have a person they call agriculture correspondent. Agriculture correspondent became someone who covers agriculture ministry. Okay? And if the person in charge is very powerful, they would only cover, like Sharad Pawar, they would cover only the agriculture minister. And you would be called agriculture correspondent. This person cannot tell a tomato from a cucumber. Yeah, but he is the agriculture correspondent. By the way, I myself do not claim to be an expert on farming in the science of the term. I claim to be someone who knows something about people who live off farming. That's what I understand. That's what I will also talk to you about. I know things about people workers who live in different occupations, live off the occupation. I do not claim to be an expert on all those occupations. The farming beat then disappeared, though you continued to have agriculture correspondent. Now, 15 years ago, this agriculture correspondent was covering agriculture ministry and agriculture minister. That too has changed. Today they are largely covering, agriculture correspondent covers agribusiness. That's what he is covering or she is covering. They're covering agribusiness. They're covering Monsanto, Bayer, etc. And by the way, please see in your newspapers how many agriculture correspondents who cover essentially agribusiness today, how many of them have written and told you in your newspaper or told you on your channel that the government of India and Indian Council of Agricultural Research have signed partnership agreements, not contract, partnership agreements with Amazon and Bayer. Bayer is the biggest manufacturer of pesticides and other chemical agricultural inputs in the planet. You want to know how big Bayer is? Bayer owns Monsanto. Bayer owns Monsanto. Okay? And Amazon and Bayer are now partners. There is a partnership agreement in writing, officially, not secretive, between Indian Council of Agricultural Research and these two giant corporations. Amazon is going to teach your farmers about logistics. Now the essential thing is, both these corporates and several others are going to have 100% access to AgriStack. Your giant agriculture database, they have 100% access to AgriStack. They have entered all the KVKs. I don't know in Tamil Nadu what, I forget the word. Krishi Vigyan Kendra, what are they called here? Krishi Kendra. Huh? So they have now entered corporations have entered hundreds of Krishi Kendras across the country where they can happily promote their products, and they have the data from AgriStack to tell them what is going on in agriculture. Point number one of today is, if you don't understand the context in which we are living, you will not understand what is happening to labor or to anything else. Second, you are, just to give you a sense, second thing is, you are trying to cover something, cover it through the lives of people. It becomes even more important. It's in the People's Archive of Rural India. And towards the end, I will show you some great photographs of workers and working people, several of them taken by someone who I consider today Tamil Nadu's greatest photographer. He is sitting right here. He is not only a photographer of working people, he is from the working class. Palani Kumar will show you some of his photographers. How everything is done, what he does, how all of us do, through the lives of people. To understand labor and work, you have to understand the labor process, which he does more brilliantly than anyone I know. You have labor process, you have the context. You cannot cover, it's just like you cannot cover farmers and farm workers without covering big landlords. You cannot cover that. You have to cover the big landlords. You have to cover the giant feudal people. You cannot cover workers or working people unless you know what's happening with the bourgeoisie, with the ruling class. What's happening with them? Do you know that today, inequality in India, the concentration of wealth in a few hands is so great, so total. Inequality in India, the World Inequality Lab, led by researchers like Thomas Piketty, Capital in the 20th century. Piketty and his team have concluded, which includes 2-3 Indians, by the way, have concluded that inequality in wealth and income inequalities in India are today greater than they were in the heyday of British imperialism in the 1920-21 period. And that was a victorious England having won, World War I, having defeated Germany, having defeated the Axis powers. So, to give you an idea of what those levels of inequality are, my favorite I am giving you the data from my favorite website, Forbes. They have a section called ForbesBillionaires.com. I track it on a weekly basis. I track it because they give you real-time assessments of the wealth of every billionaire in the world. So on March 31st, on March every year, on March 7th or March 8th every year, they publish Forbes Billionaires list for the preceding year. Though it will be called Forbes Billionaires 2024, they will give you the list for the preceding year. For some peculiar reason, Forbes publishes its billionaires list every year on International Women's Day, though there are very few women in the list. Maybe it's an aspirational thing, you be good girls and you can also do it. So this is one thing that's happening. In the Forbes billionaires list, India did not have a single dollar billionaire in 1991, not even one. They started becoming multimillionaires, crorpatis, etc., etc. 96 and we got our first dollar billionaire. As of July 16th, I checked the latest date possible for you. As of July 16th, the country that had zero billionaires 91 to 96 has $214 billionaires, and their cumulative wealth is equal to 1/3 of your gross domestic product. Your GDP is what, 272 lakh crores at current prices. Their cumulative wealth is 1056.7 billion US dollars. Yeah. So that is 1.7 to 1.8 times that 1056 billion dollars as a share of your GDP is 29%. 29% of your gross domestic product is held by 214 individuals, equivalent, I'm saying the wealth equivalent to 1/3 of your gross domestic product, which brings to your memory the whole other meaning of the word gross. And mind you, the wealth is not concentrated. We all discuss wealth concentrated in top 10%, top 1%. In India, the wealth is not concentrated in the top 1%. Please. 214 individuals is 0.00015% of your population. 1.4 billion population, 214 individuals. You see what it is? It is 0.000015%, holding wealth equivalent to 1/3 of your GDP. So, with that, and it's not even within those 214. Within the 214, out of that 1056, 40% is controlled by the top 10, 30% is controlled by the top 5. The top 5 individuals account for 318 billion or 320 billion out of the 1056 billion. Your concentration is in 0.00 infinity. Okay? That is the concentration of wealth in India. It's against this that you have to understand what has happened to the working people of this country. If you don't have this picture always in your mind, you're not going to understand the extent, the nature, the impact on people of that. This wealth, is it that there is huge growth and everybody's boats are sailing? Nonsense. The COVID period gives you a fantastic autopsy of the society we are. From 1991 to 2019, we added on average 4 to 4.5 billionaires a year. Healthy rate, 4.5 billionaires a year we added from 1991 to 2019. In the first 12 months of COVID, we added $42 billionaires. 24 of them in that list were in the health sector. So you know where the money came from. Now you added $42 billionaires in the same 12 months when the government of India tells you the economy tanked by 7.7%. So it wasn't making money from a growing economy, You made your money from a shrinking economy. That means the burden on working people was horrendous. The burden on working people was horrendous with that. Yeah. So you need to know that it wasn't coming from high growth. It wasn't coming from distribution. It wasn't coming from equitable, advances and development. It was coming from sucking the money out upwards from the Indian poor. That's what happened. That is yet another thing. By the way, also this whole period, you can measure the level of inequality. We are all very glad about the Lok Sabha election results, and we have reason to rejoice over those results. But please have a sense of context in what has happened. In 2004, you'll see the inequality of India reflected now. In 2004, we introduced the electoral affidavits. In 2004, we introduced the electoral affidavit, in which the candidate attaches her or his self-stated assessment of worth. You are giving an assessment of your self-worth. You are not required to attach your income tax return. And people, when asked to state what their wealth is on record, they tend to be very modest. So what happens in 2004? Even by just self-assessment of worth, 32% of all Lok Sabha MPs were crorpatis, rupees, Indian rupee crorpatis. All 32% of all Lok Sabha MPs. In 2009, that was 53%. In 2014, it was 82% of all MPs were crorpatis. In 2019, it was 88% of all Lok Sabha MPs were crorpatis. In 2024, 93% of all Lok Sabha MPs are crorpatis. So, so some 500 crorpatis are going to represent 1 billion of the poorest people on earth. Okay? That is inequality. And in this election, every party had to find the richest candidates possible, because the BJP has been winning elections by destroying the funding ecosystem of every opposition force. Half the opposition treasurers are in jail. Raids. 90% of all the electoral bonds money went to the Bharatiya Janata Party. Parties were fighting this election broke. This election was not the victory of the political parties. People went out and defeated the BJP. Understand this. The parties were hamstrung, helpless, but people went out and defeated the BJP. And you can also look at how the media covered it. The rich media covered it as obnoxious. Who are the media owned by? They're owned by the same corporations. We'll come to that in a minute. So if you look at the cutting edge of journalism, in the 2024 elections, it came from individual YouTube channels in the states where the BJP was functioning. Okay? With the exception of Dainik Bhaskar in the Hindi belt, which was raided many times over but somehow kept going. The only big business house paper that showed some courage. I'm not talking only about Ravish, a friend of mine. He's a good friend of mine. I think he's the best. But it wasn't just about Ravish Kumar. There were people of the age group I see sitting in this audience, young guys with, 200,000 followers. Some who came in with 800 followers and who have gone to 4 lakh followers. Now I'm not praising these digital platforms. They are the worst monopolies, but they are yet to shut the doors. They are yet to close the windows. They will do that. Depending on how much we can resist, they will do that. So the cutting edge, the fighting journalism came from those channels. You go back and see only those little channels, young guys, girls from UP were saying BJP will not get 40 seats in Uttar Pradesh. Everybody else was hoping, bring them down from 62 to 50, that will be an achievement. Those young people were consistently saying, BJP will not hit 40 seats, they got 33 in Uttar Pradesh. So there's some hope, there is something there, because those young people are living and understanding the context of what is going on in Uttar Pradesh. They understand what is happening on the ground, and that's the only way. Second, you have to go further in telling the lives. Okay, just to give you an idea, we have looked at one end of the spectrum, okay, on billionaires and their wealth. Though, just let me give you one more example. I said of the top 5 billionaires account for, 30% of the total billionaire wealth. Incidentally, the total billionaire wealth of 1,056 billion is 63 times the size of your agriculture budget. Your agricultural budget is 1.25 lakh crores, roughly. 1,056 billion is billion dollars is 1.7 times your total budget expenditure of $562 billion. Your total budget expenditure was $562 billion, and I'm not going into purchasing power parity and all that nonsense, because suppose you're a middle class parent sending your daughter to education in the USA and you have to pay $30,000 tuition fee for which you take a loan per semester. You're not going to get your loan in purchasing power parity. No? You're going to pay $83 rupees to a dollar. That's what you're going to pay. So that's how I am looking at it. Actual transactional value of the rupee and dollar. So it is 1.7 times your total budgetary expenditure. It is 63 times your agriculture budget. One gentleman, Mr. Ambani, whose father I knew once, his wealth is $118 billion. $118 billion is 7.5 times your agriculture budget. Please, it's very, now the other gentleman, Mr. Adani, who caught up and overtook Mr. Ambani for a while before the Hindenburg stuff happened. Mr. Adani was not a billionaire in the year 1998-99. He was not a billionaire in year 2000. In 2003, his fortunes start rising parallel to the rise of his friend in Gujarat. In 2013, on the eve of the great transition, Mr. Adani was worth about $3.5 billion. And then he starts shooting up. Between 2013 or 2019 and 22, Mr. Adani's wealth rises 1,500%. To give you why that is such an extraordinary figure, in the same period, Elon Musk's wealth rose 1000%, but Mr. Adani's rose 1500%. Far greater than Elon Musk of Tesla and Twitter and whatever else. That is the kind of wealth, and you can see how the wealth was accumulated. The wealth of our top billionaires runs parallel to the rise of their friends in political power. This is what is happening with them. And when you have that kind of wealth, you're going to see it has to be at the cost of incredible deprivation on the ground. Look at what happened when in the 2021 Forbes list, we added 42 new billionaires, out of whom 10 or 14 were from the health sector. Totally our health sector billionaires was 24. Okay. Now, while this incredible wealth was going on, what was happening on the ground? The giant migrations, people returning to their village in a struggle for survival was happening. To this day, do we have a figure of how many people went back to their villages? How many crores of migrants were there? I can try making an assessment, but it will be a very partial assessment, because the government in fact destroyed whatever data there was. To this day, today in the morning, if you read the Hindu, you'll see government has dismissed an independent study saying that 1.12 million people died during the pandemic, excess deaths. And they have very angrily reacted to the study. Actually, I also reject the study because 4 other assessments, world institutions making assessments, Lancet said 4.2 million excess deaths. WHO said 4.7 million excess deaths. Global Development Council DC said 4.9 million excess deaths in India. Johns Hopkins maintained 3 concurrent lists of different methodologies, all of them above 4 million. But the Vishwaguru said 4,86,000, and once the Vishwaguru has spoken, no further debate is allowed. So then comes the migrations which is happening. On March 31st, 2020, the Attorney General of India submitted an affidavit and made a speech in the Supreme Court of India saying, as of today, March 31st, 2020, there is not a single migrant on the highways. Not a single migrant on the highways on March 31st, 2020. The trusting judges of the bench of Supreme Court accepted that. 14 days later, the same Attorney General tells the same innocent Supreme Court bench 23,650 relief and food centers have been opened across the country. 23,000 relief and food centers have been opened by governments across the country to help the migrants. Now, if there was not a single migrant on the streets, why were you opening 23,000 centers for promoting tourism in the pandemic or what? They did not mention that 62% of the 23,000 centers, 62% were opened only in Kerala. Just in Kerala alone, 62% came. And Kerala is not even the biggest migrant destination, but 62% of the site. So they were using the word governments in court to make you, actually in the BJP states there was almost nothing at that time. In the first 15 days, almost zero. The few hundred here and there across those states. So how do we know how many people went? As reporters, as journalists, always understand the complexity, big governments, very large governments, large bureaucracies. One department will suppress what another department celebrates as its achievement. Okay? So, while the government was suppressing the numbers of people displaced, CMIE also faced tax issues. Center for Monitoring Indian Economy also faced tax issues when they said 118 million Indians lost their jobs in April 2020. When all of this happened, they lost their the numbers of people migrating were being suppressed. The court was being told not a single migrant on the highway, etc. If this was true, then on May 26th, Indian Railways gives the game away. Remember, in large bureaucracies, one department will suppress what another department celebrates. On May 26, 2020, the Indian Railways put out a press release that between May 1 and May 25, Indian Railways were proud, and I salute the Indian Railways for that. They transported, you remember the Shramik train, the labor train? They transported 91 lakh workers in 25 days. And that was the third month of the pandemic. March, April, May. Not even 2.5 months because your lockdown started on March 25th. But Indian Railways transported, incidentally, it's wrong to say they transported 91 lakh. 91 lakh was tickets issued. In India, those of us who cover working people, those of us who cover poor rural people, those of us who cover farmers' agitations, will tell you one thing. The poor in India have a very healthy attitude, rural Indians have a very healthy attitude towards public transport. They think public transport is meant for the public. Why should they be paying for it? So, say if 2,000 farmers went from Tamil Nadu to the agitation in Delhi, do you think they bought 2,000 tickets? They would have bought 150 to 200 tickets and they'll pass them around, and the TT will also, he is also from the same class that they are, or they might give him 100 rupees or 200 rupees, and that's how people travel. So if you sold 91 lakh tickets, it means not less than 1.5 crore people have traveled on those trains. And you could go and see, it was overpacked, people were hanging out of the train, but even if we say 1 crore, and 1 crore had moved by bus, by foot, by everything else, not less than 20 million migrant workers, laborers, went back to their villages in this period. My guess is that it would be 2-3 times that, it would be 2 times, 3 times that number. But I have no way of proving it for you. But the Indian Railways shows me not less than 2 crore workers went back. They were only getting it for 25 days. That press release. Now, in this, the kind of things that happen, again, you have to tell the stories through the lives of people. In Chhattisgarh, from Chhattisgarh, there are villagers who come as chili pickers in the Telangana region. They come to Telangana and they pick chilies. These are landless, I mean, these are tribals. They are workers. When when the lockdown came, the landlords told the workers, you have to go now, and we cannot sustain you here. So they started walking back. By the way, in People's Archive of Rural India, of which I am editor, Palani is the chief photographer, we've done dozens of stories of people, some of whom walked 800 kilometers, 1000 kilometers to go home. Yeah, people went from Chennai to Odisha. People went from Chennai and Andhra to Gadchiroli in Maharashtra. And they went up to the north of Maharashtra, also home there. People walked from Telangana to Chandrapur, Gadchiroli in Maharashtra, through Project Tiger territory, through very, very dense forest also, they went through those things. In the chili pickers of Telangana, some girls were, some 200 were from a couple of villages in Chhattisgarh. One of them was a 12-year-old girl called Jamlu. She walked 140 kilometers, and that time, by the way, the government also came up with a law, with a rule. No movement on the highways between 7 p.m. and 7 a.m. because migrants were walking in the dark. You know what it meant? It meant that you condemned people to walk between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., the hottest hours of the hottest month in the hottest years. Jamlo walked 160 kilometers and dropped dead. 60 kilometers from her mother's arms, she dropped dead. She dropped dead from muscle fatigue, from dehydration, from muscle failure. She just dropped dead. You can read her story. Incidentally, the People's Archive of Rural India publishes in 15 languages. We will add a 16th by the end of the year, including regular publishing in Tamil. So please look at Pari. You'll see God knows how many stories on the migrants and COVID-19. And workers and COVID-19, Palani's series on Safai Karamcharis and civic workers and the manual scavengers, all of that. Now the unemployment thing also is quite devastating. And when you try understanding through people's lives, also try illustrating your words and data with pictures, what I call word pictures. Now, I just looked up the employment exchange figures from 2016 to 2022. Employment exchanges are a very limited measure of knowing how much. It only tells you, it uses the word job seeker, not unemployed. But it means the number of people looking for jobs is never below, in the last 6 years, never below 42 million who are registered at employment exchanges on the live register. Okay? Now, you can write 42 million people are on the live registers who have been there, who go there every other day to look if there's a job. There's another way of putting it. What is 42 million? My way of putting it to you is, suppose we put 42 million workers in a single queue, one queue only. If they have only one queue, a single queue, how many people can you fit into a single queue? The tightest you can have is 2 people in 1 meter. Agree? 31 inches, 32 inches. two people in 1 meter so that my nose is in that guy's collar. You can fit. Two people in 1 meter is 2,000 to a kilometer, 20,000 for 10 kilometers. Do you know what is 42 million? 42 million is 3.5 times your coastline. The Indian coastline, 3.25 times your coastline. The Indian coastline is 6,800 kilometers or 6,083 kilometers, sorry. If you include the island coastlines, then it comes to 7,000 something. Even then, it is 3 times your total coastline. Imagine one queue of unemployed or people wanting a job desperately coming to the queues. This is what the state of working people looking for work is like in your country. Now, why do the media not cover this? Who owns the media? Do you know the value of your media industry? In media industry is not media industry, it's always joined with entertainment industry. In the stock exchange, elsewhere, everywhere, it is called the ME industry. Media and entertainment. As you know, the two are very closely, they're organically linked. Now, just taking the registered media entities, the media entities that have stock exchange presence, that have all these sort of things, in March this year, the M&E industry was estimated by Ernst & Young. You know, Standard & Poor, Ernst & Young, these guys who tell you how rich you are. It said, and these are only for people who have a share bazaar presence, a stock market presence, etc. The value was 2.32 trillion rupees. Trillion is 12 zeros. Billion is 9. 2.32 trillion rupees. Right? And if you look at these that is, by the way, $28 billion USD. And then a few days later, just in April, Mr. Mukesh Ambani struck a deal with Disney Hotstar worth $8.5 billion. One man, $8.5 billion, which made it $36 billion from $28 billion. And in that, one individual owns 30 to 40% of total value. Am I confusing you, or do you follow what I'm saying? Yeah. I predicted 10 years ago in the Journalists Union annual conference, by 2025 we could all be working for Ambani. Yeah. You know, you see your ETV Tamil, ETV Malayalam, ETV Kannada, they are not owned by Enadu TV of Mr. Ramoji Rao. Except for the Telugu channels, all the other 19 ETV channels are owned by Mr. Ambani. Mr. Ambani does not know how many TV channels he owns. I could probably tell him, but I don't think he'd be interested in hearing anything from me. So this is the thing, the kind of concentration. When you have that kind of concentration, billionaires owning the media, they are going to write more, your media are going to focus on the lives of the billionaires, as you saw the wedding coverage, which was attended by senior editors from Chennai, by the way, and one of whom wrote an angry tweet attacking me as a killjoy when I pointed out that this wedding is spending some, they were all speculating. Is it $150 million, $260 million? I said, don't worry, Ambanis will tell us. They want us to know. They're not spending it to keep it a secret. They need us to know how much they're spending. That's the whole bloody purpose. Okay. Second thing is, these weddings are happening in a country with a 30-year agrarian crisis where weddings have collapsed in lakhs across the countryside. Maharashtra government officially several years ago put out a figure 3 lakh unmarried girls in 6 districts whose parents were unable to get them married in 6 districts of Vidarbha. Now the boot is on the other foot. The boys are not able to get married. The girls in the farming community have changed focus. They are only marrying government servants, however low, because there is a stability to that, security to that job. The boys, no one is willing to give their daughter to a farmer. So now boys are, many unmarried boys in the villages are 32, 33. Unmarried girls in the villages at the time I did that story was a girl at 26 in a village. Her chances of marriage are over. Yeah. So, incidentally, there are, as you know, all of you know, inability to get the daughter's wedding done was a factor in the suicides of some of the farmers. The stigma and the male ego, or whatever you want to say. You know, many of you know that, but many of you do not know that a few months later, some of the daughters of the farmer who committed suicide, who took his life, also took their own lives, blaming themselves for the death of the father. Okay? Even if she didn't, there are half a dozen people in the village to make it clear to her that the father took his life, poor fellow, because he could not get you married. Okay? And so I wrote this. This is what I put out a tweet. I put out one tweet in 3 months or something. More than that, I get exhausted. But yeah, now you look at this society, and our distinguished editor from Chennai had a tweet that these are killjoys, you know, not allowing people to have fun on an important occasion. However, she did not mention that she attended the wedding. She did not mention that she attended the wedding, which itself shows that, you know, how defensive you are about it, that kind of vulgar expenditure. Okay, in the media, 10 minutes, I'm done. Historically, journalists and print workers came from working class and lower middle class. From the late 19th century, as print media grew, there was an increasingly literate section of the working class. In the print workers in US, UK, Europe were working class. And sometimes journalists came from the print workers' families. From the 70s on, 60s, 70s in India. And in India, journalists came from the freedom fighters. Okay? In India from the 70s. When I joined UNI in 1980, September 20th, the Appan Menon and I were the first people working at Sujit Datta, Appan Menon and I were the first people working in an Indian news agency who were working towards an MPhil PhD. All the people around the desk were high school graduates, but they were politically savvy. They were connected with their society. They would always land on their feet. They may have written in horrible English, but they knew what the hell was going on. Within 3 years of our being there, PTI was putting out notices. Anybody with less than MA need not apply. Now today, and if you look, journalism school fees in the big journalism schools in India, fees, hostel, accommodation, food is not less than 7 lakhs. So, which straight-out society can afford it? There has been a huge change in the class composition of journalists. And with it, the class consciousness that comes with liberalization of the different classes, the different ideas. Now, not one newspaper made an issue of it, when India became the first nation in the world during the pandemic to reverse the gold standard of labor, which is 8-hour working day. We made it 12-hour working day. No overtime, pro rata. What you got for the first 8 hours, you get for the next 4 hours. No nation in the world did this. Not the United States, not anyone. India did it. First state to do it, Gujarat and Uttar Pradesh. The first 2 states to do it. Now you've got all this kind of crap coming into your labor codes. I'm trying to tell you, when you cover that, don't cover it by word and text alone. Tell it through the lives of people, what it's actually doing to food in the labor household, what it is doing to health in the labor household, what it is doing to education in the labor household. Now, I am the thing is, don't think that these monopolies, the biggest problem central is monopoly. Don't think that these monopolies, that there is monopolies in print and television and your social media, forget it. They are not free. They are today anarchistic and not fully organized because people are trying to figure out revenue models. But the digital monopolies are the nastiest, worst monopolies in human history. Why do I say that? No other monopoly in history owns your personal data. These guys control your personal data, they sell it, they trade in it. If you send a message saying, I'm going to Kashmir for a holiday, you send a mail to your friend. How many advertisements do you get for holiday resorts in Kashmir? They have algorithmed you out of your intellect. Yeah. You buy a book from Amazon, you get 35 recommendations. They have your credit card data. They have your bank data. These are the most dangerous monopolies in history. But there are spaces there now. There's only one more thing I'm going to do in those remaining 3 minutes. But I'm going to tell you one, cover the stories through the lives of people. Cover the labor process. Don't say that, okay, they have reduced their money by so much, say that. But go and show your viewer and reader what it's done to the kitchen in that home, what it's done to lunch and dinner and meals in the worker's home. That is the way that you're going to tell the story, and you have to tell the stories of resistance to it also. One of the greatest things that happened in India, which your media never told you, the farmer struggle that took place, never once did your media tell you that it was the largest organized struggle for justice, the largest organized struggle for justice in the world, organized at the height of the pandemic. At the height of the pandemic, it was At the height of the pandemic, it was organized. It was 1,000 times bigger than the Occupy Wall Street about which you read so much. Occupy Wall Street, 8,000, 9,000 young people, techies, occupied Zuccotti Park, New York. 9 weeks later, they were thrown out. Your farmers and agricultural labor unions were there in full from Punjab and Haryana. They held out 53 weeks. They fought security forces, paramilitary, CISF, BSF. There was a bigger mobilization at Delhi than there was on the line of control with China. And still they could not be thrown out. It talk of the struggles and the victories and the inspiration that workers' struggles have. But above all, follow their lives and keep bringing the stories of what is happening to people. And I'm just going to run you through 5-6 slides of Tamil, some of them from Tamil Nadu. And you can see what the kind of okay, these, by the way, are migrant workers in Mumbai from Uttar Pradesh. Their entire education was closed down. And you know, how many children, how many girls below the age of 18 own their own smartphone? So girls were totally excluded from education for 2 years. Yeah. In Pari, we did studies in the Adivasi areas of Maharashtra. How many girls, I asked the reporters to go and tell me how many girls, Adivasi girls below the 18 have a smartphone of their own, or they came back and told me, you're joking. No girl below the age of 18 has a phone, even upper caste women. Okay? And those upper caste girls who have, they are in the cities. They are not here. And it is considered a bad thing for a young girl to be what she'll get up to. So, like in Rajasthan, that was an elite city. So these two boys, that is a young fellow, a Muslim from Mirzapur, is standing there. He has borrowed his uncle's cell phone and he is selling vegetables and telling his teacher, Madam, please give me 5 minutes leave. Give me 5 minutes leave so that I can do this. Then all school, 4 children in schools became workers in Latur during Maharashtra. These were a bunch of guys. Our reporter walked with them on the last 1,500 kilometers, 800 kilometers from Telangana to Maharashtra's Gondia district. These were the empty schools in the lockdown period. And he's just. Oh, by the way, this was the group of workers going back from Chhattisgarh, and this is Jammu. This is Jammu. Okay? The girl who fell dead walking back to Mumbai. This are Palani's incredible photographs. These were the Dalit workers burned to death in Shivakasi. How many months ago? Sorry. Last. Yeah. Palani's photographs of salt pan workers in Thoothukudi. Each of these leads into a story of workers and fantastic photographs. These were the sanitation workers that Palani photographed during the initial stages of the pandemic. And you can see the luxury and wealth in the background and the worker risking his life in the COVID-19 pandemic. Fish workers. This, for me, is one of the greatest photo essays done on working people in the fish worker community. The fisher people community, these women off the coast of Ramnad, they dive into the water, they bring up seaweed. That seaweed, they will get 200 rupees per kilo or something in a day. That seaweed makes your medicines and food industry. Big pharma makes billions of dollars from seaweed. Oh, by the way, you make your jelly, your food jelly, it comes from seaweed. Many vital life-saving drugs and medicines come from seaweed. The women who dive into that, fully clad in all their saris, etc., they will earn 200 rupees in a day from doing that in one season. Palani dived into the water with a very primitive GoPro camera of the earliest thing and photographed them in their tasks. A 56 photo essay is there on Pali, and the essay is written in Tamil. You'll find it in Tamil as well. So please look at it. I just wanted to give you a run-up. There's no time for more. I will stop there, but always bear in mind the political covering labor in. And one last piece of advice, when you're trying to cover someone's work, try doing the work they do. Today, after 44 years, and since 2004 NRGS came, to this day, when I go into the countryside, I try doing a day's work on the NRGS. Okay? It reminds me of how incredibly difficult it is, how my body is aching after half an hour, while a 12-year-old girl is going away with that crowbar, digging. And why is she wearing a full sari? Because she is trying to pretend that she is 14 or above, so that she be given the work. Understand what is happening to labor in this country. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Comrade Sainath. We can take few questions. We have. The audiences have any questions? Few questions. Just like 2 or 3 questions maybe.
Kindly raise your hand. You have one hand.
1, 2, and 3 maybe.
Yeah. Hi sir, my name is Alan Chuketwani. My name is Alan Chuketwani, and I'm a student from Asian College of Journalism. I have like 2 questions for you. One is on the current media ecosystem. In the current media ecosystem, in order to cover issues of marginalized community, who do you think the journalists should approach? Even if they are there are very less media organizations which covers issues of marginalized communities. For that matter, Article 14, Pari is one good example. So I feel like, do you think so, with the amount of, the number of media outlets that are there which covers issues of marginalized communities, do you think so journalists can, approach any other media organization other than that? And also, do you think so, can journalists survey with the amount of money they receive in case of covering such stories?
Amount of money?
They receive for stories they cover. Like payments are usually very less in mainstream media organization, and I feel like Pari and Article 14 is doing a great job in that matter. But almost none of other media outlets do that. So
okay,
yeah.
First you can approach mainstream media organizations, and I would advise you to approach them. But it depends on how much interest they show and what space they have for your stories. I would always approach mainstream media organizations. And by the way, they don't pay better than because if we send someone somewhere on a story, we cover the transport, we cover the travel, all that we do. If we have commissioned a person, we have told them, you go and do this, we will pay them. But in the mainstream media, remember there is no labor fee. You have to sell this in different ways. You have to sell it as a human interest story. You have to sell it in all those different. You have to sell it in all those different ways. Yeah. You have to sell it in various different ways. Make it compelling. That you have to make. It's essentially a very difficult job to make the editor believe that it is in his interest, that it's in his interest, that it's in the paper's interest. Much of my life in the mainstream media, which was 34 years, went in telling editors that this was your idea, and I went out and followed it up. Yeah. So that's one thing. It's a very difficult exercise, but you need to try it and try getting into that. Because of the reach that they have, if you get it into that, it makes a very big difference. Payments in the mainstream media or anywhere else, they are extremely poor. The media is not the place for you if you are thinking of big money. In the top 1% of anchors, the Arnab Goswamis, the Rajat Sharmas, they make crores each year. But the average journalist wage in India is terrible. Yeah. All of us went through that wage board phase, etc., etc. And it also shows, by the way, very often the wage boards have been violated by the owners. The Supreme Court has reprimanded them, they've still violated it because they're so powerful they can get away with it. So if your aim in a career is big bucks, you're in the wrong profession. If your aim is to write about people, you're going to have to struggle for it always. Lastly, what I will be telling you in December when I come as part of that course is, if you want to do challenging journalism, if you do challenging journalism, be sure you will be challenged. Yeah. Two more on that. Yeah.
ராஜிதன் யூனியன் செக்ரட்டரி உமகை காங்கிரஸ் அசோசியேஷன் செக்ரட்டரி. ஊடகங்களை தொழிலாளர்கள் அணுகுவது, அதாவது தொழிலாளர்கள் ஊடகங்கள் அணுகுவது, இந்த ரெண்டு இடத்துல ஊடகங்கள்
access
தொழிலாளர்களுடைய செய்தியை
How do workers
access journalists?
ஊடகங்கள் தொழிலாளர்களுடைய செய்தியை ரெண்டு விஷயத்துக்காக பயன்படுத்துறாங்க. ஒன்று செய்தியை
They use
பரவலாக்குறது,
workers' issues for two things. One, to popularize the issue,
அரசியல் சார்புக்கு
and
இந்த தொழிலாளர்
to
பிரச்சனையை
just use this as a favor of their politics.
இதிலிருந்து தொழிலாளர்கள் அவர்களுடைய பிரச்சனையவோ அல்லது அவர்களுடைய செய்தி அவர்கள் விரும்புகிற செய்தியை
How do
தொழிலாளி
workers,
வர்க்க கண்ணோட்டத்தில் கொண்டு போய் சேர்க்கணும்
how do, in the
அப்படிங்கிற
angle
அந்த
of working
பார்வையில
class,
ஊடகத்தை எப்படி அணுகுவது?
how do we approach media with this angle?
There are
They are interested in their own politics.
there are different there are 2-3 different avenues through which you access that media, but by far the most powerful one is the struggles of the worker. You make it impossible for them not to confront it. That's what the farmers did in Delhi. There are no agriculture and no farming correspondents, but they made themselves heard around the world. They taught us the meaning of the word resistance. That is going to happen. But many of the struggles are going to be local. Saving your factory, your water, your school, these are going to be local struggles. But the intensity and impact of those struggles will force media. You can force media. You won't always succeed. You will not always succeed, but it is your only weapon. Your organized collective strength of the poor is the greatest weapon they have. That's one. Second is, individuals in the media and individuals in media outside the mainstream, the YouTube channels, the young people doing things, you can access them. Again, for that, I would say you would do it best. I mean, there are many sympathetic youngsters who are willing to listen to you, but may not be able to get it published in their newspaper. But they can also help you and advise you on your own media. Yeah, you have to run your own media as well. You have to have your website for, and you have to have the collective strength of the union behind that approach. And the third is, you can yourselves write your stories. They will be far more authentic, far more thing. And like we asked a person, a migrant laborer from Mumbai going back to Jharkhand, to tell us his own story on video because he came to Bombay to become a video editor. He's a worker. So he told his own story. So these are the different ways in which you can, but your struggles will be always the major and most important. Yeah.
மொழிபெயர்ப்பு உங்களுக்கு கிடைச்சது அப்படின்னு நம்புறேன். சுருக்கமாக நான் சொல்லணும் அப்படின்னா, ஒன்று ஏற்கனவே இருக்கிற ஊடக தளங்களை வந்து நம்ம பயன்படுத்துறது அப்படின்றது ரொம்ப அவசியமாக இருக்கும். அண்ட் நம்மளோட போராட்டங்கள் தவிர்க்கவே முடியாமல் ஆயிடுச்சு. கண்டிப்பாக கட்டாயமாக நீங்கள் வந்து தான் ஆகணும். விவசாய போராட்டத்தில் நடந்த மாதிரி நம்மளோட போராட்டங்கள் தவிர்க்கவே முடியாமல் இருக்கிற பட்சத்தில் கண்டிப்பாக அவங்க கவர் பண்ணுற வேண்டிய அழுத்தத்துக்கு வருவாங்க. மூணாவது, நம்மளோட கதைகளை நம்மளே சொல்றது. ஏன் நம்ம மற்றவங்களுக்கு வெயிட் பண்ணணும்? நம்மளோட ஊடகத்தலங்களை இப்போ யூடியூப் இருக்கு, நம்ம கையிலே அதுக்கான ஆயுதங்கள் இருக்கும்போது நம்மளுமே இந்த கதையை சொல்றது அப்படின்றது வந்து ரொம்ப அவசியமா இருக்குன்னு சொல்லியிருக்கேன்.
நெக்ஸ்ட் ஒரு மூணு கேள்வி தான் இருக்கிறேன். ஐ எம் சாரி. The questions already 1, 2 and 3. Now the conversation from sorry.
Hi, could you shed some light on the unionization of journalists themselves, especially in confronting the challenges that they face and covering stories of workers and working?
The process is actually the reverse process. What we've had in the last 35 years, 40 years, is the de-unionization of journalists. Once upon a time, the working journalist movement was a very powerful movement in this country. Then they brought, and very important to labor law, they brought the contract system. Journalists had tenure, security of tenure. Yeah, it was not easy to sack a journalist. Now, this contract system, according to me, is illegal and violative of the Working Journalists Act. Yeah, it is violative and illegal in terms of the wage boards, but above all, it violates the Working Journalists Act, which gives us security by reducing everything to 11 months contract. Now, all media in the country have no choice but to run on these lines. Now, in COVID, I'll give you an example. In COVID, so anyway, once the contracts came, the unions were destroyed. Because you are 9 months away, you are 2 months away, you are 9th month of the 11-month contract. You are 2 months away from re-signing on your contract. The pressure on you to conform to what the management wants is phenomenal. It's too much. You've got, when I broke the paid news story in the Hindu in 2009, and I got a call from one of the senior most journalists of Maharashtra, honest person. And he said, it's all very well for you and me. We grew up as journalists in a time when the Working Journalists Act was honored, when we all had strong trade unions. But today, he said, every one of us, including him, we have 11-month contracts. I have 2 kids in college, one looking for a job, and one I'm seeking an education loan to send her abroad, studies. I am paying 3 EMIs, multiple EMIs on the bank loans, on a car loan, on a housing loan. Do you want me to be a hero? Okay. So the destruction of unions is central to how the capitalist controls society as a whole, not just, it is only the unions that are going to, but journalism, the unions have been, Delhi Union of Journalists has some strength. Kerala Union of Journalists has some strength. But by and large, all unions have lost a great deal of strength in the media world. In the television world, it's impossible. You try organizing, they'll kill you. All the workers will lose their jobs. 3,500 journalists lost their jobs in the COVID period, and 15,000 non-journalist media workers. And this is after Modi declares media as an essential service, which means your job is protected, but even then they could do it. Struggles, yeah. So the deunionization, how rebuilding unions is one of a major task for all of us, not just in journalism. From? Jabalpur. Okay, Jabalpur.
So last year, we made a documentary college covering the Maria boat ride to Pratap Purwakar in Gadchiroli. So I got in contact with Part MN and Jyotish Modi of Kalioni, so they helped us. But while we were in Bhamnagar, we stayed for 3 days. There was an accident killing as well because it's like known for natural season. So when I came back, my parents were very skeptical. Should I still pursue journalism or not? Especially my inclination towards human interest stories. So how should I tackle that if I really want to make a career in this?
That is entirely your call, your decision. your moral position, what you take. I mean, no one else can take that decision for you. Your parents can tell you, but you have to take a decision on that. You know, I can understand I do understand their fears. I do understand their fears, but the fact is, I told you, if you want to do challenging journalism, you will be challenged. If you don't want to be challenged, don't do journalism. Yeah. But if you don't do journalism, how will you meet your need of telling stories, of telling human stories? So it's a moral dilemma you have to sort out. My suggestion to you is go ahead and do it. Do it for a while. You're still very young. You can change. Yeah, you can become the CEO of some startup 5 years from now. But try it out and see whether it's working or not.
So this is the last question. I'm very sorry we started late. Please bear with us. Tea will be served very soon, so we can still continue our conversations on that. Last question.
Please, Chancellor. Jayaprakash, TNGH Workers Association. What was it? அதாவது இப்போ தொழிலாளருடைய இந்த இருக்கிற பிரச்சனை
the current workers problem,
பாதுகாப்பு
the
நடைமுறை
legislation, the protection,
தொழிலாளருடைய
everything
உழைப்புக்கான ஊதியம் அதற்கான
the
பாதுகாப்பு
wages,
அதை
the protection,
குறைந்தபட்சம் வாங்கும் சக்தி இருக்கிற அளவு தான் அமைக்க போட்டிருக்கோம்.
it's only depending on the purchasing capacity of the workers.
ஆனா இப்போ இருக்கக்கூடிய சட்ட
But now
எல்லாமே
the
பாத்தீங்கன்னா
legal system
அதை ரீவைட் பண்ற மாதிரி அதாவது அதை அழிக்கிற மாதிரி
is just destroying,
சொல்ற மாதிரியும்
but
உரிமைகள் பறிக்கிற
based on
மாதிரியும்
the
அமைப்புகளை
violation of the
கூட்டமைப்புகளை
workers.
சேர்க்கிற மாதிரி பொது கருத்துக்களை சேர்க்கிற மாதிரியும் தான் கொண்டு வராங்க. அதை பேஸ் பண்ணி எல்லா சட்டமும் கொண்டு வராங்க.
The legal system is only going to like more drain the workers.
வந்து நம்ம பயணம் பண்ண வழியில தொழிலாளிகளுக்கு அரசியலை தொழிலாளிகளுக்கு ஊட்டுவதற்கும் அதனோட கூட்டா சேர்ந்த கூட போராட்டத்துக்கு தான்
Only through collective bargaining and collective solidarity we are going to get this back.
Correct.
மூலமா அதை வலுப்படுத்த முடியுன்ற நம்பிக்கை வந்து இதை விட குறைவாக தான் இருக்கு. ஏன்னா சக்சஸ்ஃபுல்லாக இல்லை.
So I have very less hope on how we can take this through journalism. They are not representing our voices, but only manipulating depending on their voices.
Okay.
தொழிலாளர் வந்து பெற்ற ஒரு போராட்டம்.
In Bangalore, there were women workers who protested. There were a fight for PF. They did not organize, but self-organized struggle. They came to road and protested. Then they took also opposite. The media from that to here, they are only not reporting these issues. So I don't have much hope on taking the workers' issues through media, but only through politicizing workers.
If you are talking about the mainstream media, you are largely correct. But then you are being very cynical towards the thousands of young people who are working within that media and very largely outside it, who are trying to tell those stories. Do you doubt Palini's journalism? Okay, there are 1,000 Palinis in the country, or people who want to be like Palini. There are 1,000. You decide who you will trust. Yeah, I would also tell you don't trust your Times of India and your giant Republic TV. These are not. Now the women workers in Bangalore and their struggle, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised that happened. But I'm saying you would find, I think, there are local channels, YouTubes, little websites in Bangalore which do cover it. Give them a chance to grow. I'll tell you what happened to us and the farmers' struggle. Yeah? Our readership, audience, doubled and trebled because we were covering the farmer struggle. Because people who could not get it from the media and from Republic TV and Times Now were looking at Pari for the farmer struggle. It became so big, Government of India ordered Google, Twitter, Facebook to close any number of accounts of farmers, and then Google tweaked its algorithm so that the number of searches for farmer struggle fell by more than 50%, and our audiences also fell. But we reached those audiences, we told the stories of the farmers and the workers, it happened. You cannot succeed in every battle. But if we say, we failed, therefore I'm not going to try, that is giving up on the struggle. Your duty as a union leader, as a union, is to use every legal, legitimate, constitutional method possible to take forward the stories of and realities of your members. So I would say think about it that way.
Thank you, Comrade Sainath. It is like, I mean, ஒரு மாதிரி அப்படின்னு ஒரு விஷயமா தான் இருக்குது. நிறைய டேட்டாஸ் நம்மளுக்கு சொல்லியிருக்காரு. பெரிய பெரிய விஷயத்துல இருந்து சின்ன விஷயங்கள் முன்வச்சாரு. மிக முக்கியமா ஒரு பத்திரிகையாளராக வந்து நீங்க ஓகே மைக் எடுத்துட்டு நம்ம உழைக்கும் மக்கள் கிட்ட மட்டும் போனா பத்தாது. ஒரு பெரிய பெரிய அரசியலும் இந்த பூஷ்வாசி அரசியலும் இந்த முதலாளித்துவ அரசியலும் நம்ம புரிஞ்சுக்காத வகையில நம்ம உழைக்கும் மக்கள் கிட்ட போனா மட்டும் பத்தாது அப்படின்ற விஷயத்தையும் பகிர்ந்துருக்காரு. ரொம்ப சின்ன சின்ன விஷயங்கள் நம்மளுடைய கதைகள் சொல்ற விதமும் எப்படி இருக்கணும், அவர் இன்னும் எவ்வளவு சின்னதா பிரேக் டவுன் பண்ணணும் அப்படின்றதுல இருந்து சின்ன விஷயத்துல இருந்து பெரிய விஷயம் வரைக்கும் நம்ம ஒரு பத்திரிகையாளரா ஒரு சமூக செயற்பாட்டாளரா நம்ம என்ன எடுத்துக்கணும் அப்படின்ற நிறைய விஷயத்த பகிர்ந்துருக்காரு. நன்றி தொடர். இப்போ சாய்நாத் அவர்களை ஃபெசிலிட்டேட் பண்றதுக்கு எலிசபெத் அவர்களை நான் ஸ்டேஜ் கூப்பிடுறேன். ஒரு சின்ன மொமெண்டோ பாரி தோழர்களையும் நான் ஸ்டேஜுக்கு அழைக்கிறேன். பழனி மற்றும் மற்ற தோழர்களும் இருந்தீங்கன்னா தயவு செஞ்சு ஸ்டேஜ்க்கு வாங்க. We would like to facilitate you. So we request Sainath to come over the stage and we have a small memento too. We request Sainath to come over the stage. Elizabeth is a garment worker. She did put forth a very strong struggle. She worked as a celebrity in a factory called Celebrity, and she won the very important struggle that the union put forth. I request Pari please to come on the stage. Pari, let's come now. Thank you very much, Comrade Sainath, for joining us for the day. I think we will now break for the tea. Okay, before the tea. Yeah, so before breaking for the tea, we now have a Comrade Sudarshan with us. He is from Reuters. He's a journalist from Reuters and a very dear friend to all of us. நம்ம தொழிலாளர் கூடமா செயல்பட்டதுல இருந்து தொடர்ச்சியாக இந்த மாதிரியான ஒரு ஒர்க் ஷாப், இந்த பயிலரங்கம் வரணும் அப்படின்றது வந்து அவருடைய ஒரு பெரிய கனவா இருந்தது. எங்களை பின்னாடில இருந்து எப்பவுமே வந்து ஊக்குவிச்சுட்டு இருந்த ஒரு தோழர். ஸோ அவருடைய அனுபவத்தை தொழிலாளர் கூட இந்த மாதிரியான ஊடக வெளியில நம்ம தோழர் ரொம்ப முக்கியமான விஷயம் இருக்காங்க. எனக்கு நம்பிக்கை இல்லைங்க இந்த மாதிரியான ஊடகங்கள்ல நான் ஏன் நம்பணும் அப்படின்ற ஒரு விஷயத்தை கேட்டாரு. ஸோ அதுக்கான பதிலாக தான் இங்கே நிறைய தோழர்கள் இருக்காங்க. அதுல இந்த மாதிரியான பிரச்சனைகளை உண்மை பக்கமும் நியாயத்தின் பக்கமும் நின்று நம்ம கொண்டு வரணும் அப்படின்ற ஆர்வத்துல தான் இங்க நிறைய பேர் வந்திருக்காங்க. ஸோ அதுல மிக முக்கியமாக பல உழைக்கும் மக்கள் பிரச்சனையா சுதர்ஷன் மாதிரியான தோழர்கள் தொடர்ச்சியா வெளிக்கொண்டு வந்துட்டு இருக்காங்க. ஸோ சுதர்ஷன் ஒரு 10 minutes அவரோட அனுபவத்தை பகிர்ந்துப்பாரு.
Welcome. My name is Darshan and I work for Reuters.